Whom the Gods Fear, by Wdowski. Chapter 2. Not since the great crash of Black Friday in 2035, when the U.S. government declared it would not be honoring its $50 trillion debt, had the world stock markets gone into such frenzy. The declared bankruptcy of the Yeager Corporation was like the death of a praying mantis between several active ant hills. The company was quickly dismantled at bargain prices to pay off the banks. The greatest loss was the venture being sold off to the highest bidder. 10 months had passed since the mysterious return of the venture from Shing 4. Yeager no longer had his company or his personal assets. He had liquidated his home and all his material goods, reinvesting them in the construction of a newer, smaller, interstellar ship. He was determined to make the trip to Shing 4 himself to discover what had happened to Captain Demi and his crew of 19. Leasing a small shipyard on the far side of the moon, Glen and his extremely loyal staff built his new starship, the Marco Polo. His past generous treatment of his people paid off significantly in his greatest time of need. A quarter of his best engineers, scientists, and technicians turned down much sweeter offers to stay with Glen at half salary. His top people, such as Landru, took no salary and invested. They knew that Glen Yeager was the type of man that would share generously with his people when he did achieve success. They also believed in his mission. Others stayed on or joined up out of sheer curiosity. They just wanted to know what had happened to the crew of the venture. With a team of 500, they worked at a feverish pace in constructing the Marco Polo. They all knew that time was not on their side in solving the venture mystery. The talking heads on social and mainstream media were fanning the fires of xenophobia. If the xenophobia did catch on, they may never be able to discover the fate of the venture's last crew. The media experts predicted that the Shingnese may have taken Captain Demi and his crew as their first step in planned assault on Earth. They fueled the flames of fear further that the Shingnese were already in the midst of torturing them for Earth's weaknesses and hyperdrive engine technology. The government, in response of the venture incident, was enlarging its interstellar navy. Glen's team realized they needed to finish their starship before the government finished their new fleet. Glen had moved his office and residence to the assembly floor of the lunar construction yard. Like many of his key engineers and scientists, he was getting only a few hours of sleep per day. The technicians, though, who overlooked the robotic manufacturing gangs, were broken down into 4 different shifts, so none of them were working longer than 6 hours per day. It was a move by Glen to ensure the quality in the ship's construction. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they worked hard in helping the Marco Polo to quickly take form. They would easily win the race against the government shipyards. The question was, would they be fast enough to come to the rescue of Captain Demi and his crew? Working with the Earth's government, Glen used his personal Shingnese contacts, along with Earth's official diplomatic corps, to try to find an answer to the venture mystery. The Shingnese insisted that Captain Demi had paid in full of the diamonds, loaded his merchandise, and left their system without mishap. The Shingnese claimed to have even sent out their limited interplanetary sublight ships to search for any signs of the venture's crew within the limits of their star system. Against Glen's advice, the Earth government, not accepting the Shingnese story, began to accuse them of being responsible for the disappearance of the venture's crew. As Glen feared, the government's approach deeply insulted the Shingnese. What surprised him was that this resulted in Glen also losing his channels to his own contacts on Shing 4. The two worlds are roughly 50 light-years apart, meaning conventional radio communications would take 100 years to transmit and receive a reply from Shing 4. The revolution of quantum mechanics twin-atom communications, or also known as SpookyCom, made interstellar communications practical. SpookyCom was a nickname derived from Albert Einstein calling the instantaneous connectional response of twin atoms at unlimited distances as spooky action at a distance. The Hawking left there. SpookyCom quantum mechanics communications system with the Shingnese that was connected with a twin system back on Earth. This enabled the two worlds to converse with each other in near real time, as opposed the century delay with conventional radio wave communications. As revolutionary as SpookyCom was, it was limited to an on-off system between the twin atoms light years apart. It was so similar to the electric clicks of the 19th century telegraph, it brought back the importance of Morse code. SpookyCom was much faster than sending a hyperdrive starship with written letters, but transmitter receivers were needed on both ends with twin atoms connected to each other. It also required operators that understood Morse code. With the spooky calm, the great distance between worlds was no longer the problem. The problem that caused delays in communications was that messages needed to be coded and decoded from Morse code, and then translated between two very different alien languages. It took months for linguistic experts and the most superior translation computers from both worlds to learn each other's languages. It was another month for the Hawkins communications officer to train a few select Shingnese Morse code and how to operate the spooky comm. With the aid of powerful linguistic computers, communications were quicker than light speed between the two worlds. Yet for humans, used to immediate replies to their communications, they found the process still slow. Their patience quickly ran thin, especially when the replies they did finally receive from the Shingnese were never to their satisfaction. The whole process of interstellar communications was extremely annoying to late 21st century humans. Miscommunications between their two alien cultures was the greatest disadvantage. Glen felt that perhaps without the involvement of the government's diplomatic professionals, he could have handled the whole interaction with the Shingnese much better. In his dealing with the Shingnese, he learned that they were extremely proud, to the point of arrogance, and were offended very easily. They did not like being questioned. They especially found it offensive to be accused of anything dishonest. They were not a people to be offended by negative facts. Their communication style was extremely straightforward. They found it annoying that humans would be so easily offended by them simply speaking the truth. The human State Department officials' fashion of flowery, roundabout, diplomatic speak. The Shingnese found extremely condescending, dishonest, a waste of time, and often offensive. While the humans had little patience for delayed communications, the Shingnese had little patience for politically correct, non-offensive human diplomatic tripe. There was also their sense that the humans looked down upon them due to their technological disadvantage to the Earth's in interstellar technology. Glen knew that the Shingnese were correct in their observation of human arrogance. Many on Earth did have a sense of superiority over the Shingnese for the simple fact, we discovered them, they did not discover us. Glen knew that just because the Earth was several decades ahead of the Shingnese in hyperspace technologies, it did not mean the Shingnese were not more advanced than humans in other fields. He never talked down to his Shingnese contacts. Human diplomats, on the other hand, would always speak to the Shingnese as if they were speaking to children, or how many Earth politicians speak down to their electorate. The news that the Shingnese had broken off diplomatic relations was a major blow to the confidence of the Marco Polo project. More seriously, the news gave fuel to the hawks in government and in the media that the Shingnese were indeed a threat. Glen did not lose his determination. He still pushed his design and construction teams forward. Rallied by Glen, the Marco Polo was ready to launch ahead of schedule. Glen was fast asleep, his head resting upon his folded arms on the hologram projection table. The star charts of the Venture's voyage to and from Shing 4 were displayed above the table. Landru entered the room and attempted to shut off the display without waking Glen. As he reached for the off button, Glen stirred. "Oh, it's you, Landru. Sorry to disturb you. Sir, I had brought you the progress report on the ship's departure preparations." "Good, I was just about to ask you for them," Glen said, lifting his head and brushing his hair back as he forced himself to wake. "I need a haircut." Touching his face, he added, "I also need a shave." Turning his attention back to Landru, he asked, "What is our status?" "The Department of State is giving us difficulty about our installation of the magnetic rail cannons." Landru linked his forearm comm to Glen's so he could read along what he had already memorized. "The Department of Defense is also requiring us to take on board 2 of their officers and their attachments to supervise the use of the rail cannons and provide onboard security. If we do not permit them to join the mission, they will not permit the installation of the weapon system." "It is our weapon system. We developed it." "Fine, make room for their military officers. I have no idea at this point what mood the Shingnese will be in when we arrive in their system." Glen reached for his coffee and took a sip. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. He was too tired to get up to have it reheated. "I should get one of those nanotech cups that keep your drink at whatever temperature you want." "I will look into getting you one." "There is another problem, sir." "Yes." Glen looked up at Landru. "The State Department is requiring that we take on board one of their diplomatic teams, or they will not permit us a system exit visa." "A system exit visa? What the hell is a system exit visa?" "Is a new visa just generated by the State Department to prevent unauthorized ships from leaving the solar system." That is unconstitutional. Do we have any lawyers still with us? Alter is still with us. I had already passed it by her. Landru replied, still standing at a military at ease. She agrees with you that the new visa is clearly a violation of the guaranteed 7th constitutional right. Yet, if you want to stay on schedule, she recommends it would be prudent to just take their diplomatic team on board. She made it clear to me the time it would take for us to fight it in the courts would delay our launching by several months, if not more, if they want to delay us. How big a ship do they think we have? Aren't they building their own starships? None of their new ships will be ready as soon as the Marco Polo. As for the few starships they already have, all are on deep exploration missions. None are near enough to return to Earth before our scheduled departure. They never expected we would have the Marco Polo completed in such record time. What about the Venture? She is still a workable interstellar ship. Why don't they just commission her? You had not heard. Heard what? Dorfman Enterprises, who purchased the Venture, has the ship in dry dock over Earth orbit. She is being completely renovated into a luxury cruise liner. She's not scheduled for launch until after us. An interstellar luxury cruise liner with all this saber rattling going on, that makes a lot of sense. Glen sarcastically responded. I hear she has become a pet project of J.D. himself. His father always did spoil him. Fine, how large is this diplomatic team so we can get this new exit visa? 3, sir, a grade 1 diplomat and 2 of her aides. Her. Glen's ears burned thinking of the only female grade 1 diplomat that had any Shingnese experience. Yes, sir, her a Ms. Stern. I believe you know her. Not in the biblical sense, thank God. Inwardly laughing in response to Glen's statement, Landru uncharacteristically let a small hint of a smile appear on his face. Landru just as quickly wiped the smile off his face in favor of his more accustomed stone-faced expression. Glen, noticing that he had actually hit Landru's funny bone, allowed himself to lighten up a bit and also briefly smiled before continuing. There is no way I am going to let Rebecca Stern on board. I never understood how such a beautiful woman, who majored in diplomatic relations, could become so ugly, so quickly, by simply opening her mouth. Finishing the last drop of his cold coffee, he looked up at Landru seriously. I will take aboard their diplomatic team, but not one headed by Rebecca Stern. Tell them to find another Shingnese expert among their rows of office cubicles. Landru noted on his forearm Glen's response to the State Department. Even though Landru's memory was as good as any computer, he still religiously wrote everything down. He learned from experience that not everyone had his memory skills. He discovered, especially for those in government and in large corporations, it was much more common to find those inflicted with revisionist and selective memories. So, he learned early in his professional career to write everything down. It was his way to help keep the record straight for the forgettable and dishonest he had to deal with. Remembering the minor details was a major reason Glen had Landru as his right-hand man.